Federal agents clashed with protesters in St. Paul and Minneapolis on January 13th, nearly a week after the fatal shooting of Renee Good by federal officers, as demonstrations continued outside the federal building and within the communities. At the Whipple Federal Building in St. Paul, federal agents deployed flashbangs as protesters shouted and confronted officers. Authorities arrested at least one woman during the confrontation. Clashes also took place in Minneapolis, where federal agents deployed tear gas and pepper balls toward protesters.
I don't want to be here. I'd rather be out running, having a swim, something like that. I go to work. I'm close to retirement. I don't want to be here. But if I don't show up, that's even worse. It's unconscionable to not stand up and say this is wrong. This is part of democracy.
Kristi Noem should stop hiding behind her MAGA wardrobe and actually come before the Congress and face the American people through their elected representatives. If she thinks her position is defensible, then show up, as opposed to stopping by for a drive-by and then scurrying out of the hearing with some fake excuse because you can't stand the heat. And that was before the killing of Renee Nicole Good. So it is clear that Kristi Noem should show up and be held accountable before the elected representatives in the House of Representatives, whether that's the Homeland Security Committee, first and foremost, Judiciary, or Oversight. But House Democrats are going to have a family conversation throughout the week in the caucus meeting and in the whip meeting about the path forward related to these most recent developments. We are unified behind the fact that under the leadership of Pramila Jayapal, there's going to be a hearing that House Democrats will hold this Friday in Minneapolis as part of the effort to hold the Department of Homeland Security accountable for its out-of-control behavior. Now, it's important to understand that a lot of the funding for ICE that is currently being unleashed on the American people, American citizens. Renee Nicole Good was a 37-year-old mom and American citizen who was cut down by ICE in plain view for all of the American people in the world to see. It's important to understand that a lot of the funding that's being unleashed on the American people in such extreme ways right now was provided not through the traditional appropriations process, but a connection with the one big ugly bill that every single Democrat and every single House, Senate Democrat opposed, every single one of us. And that Donald Trump and Republicans jammed down the throats of the American people. And so the funding dynamic that we have to navigate as it relates to ICE's out-of-control behavior is different in nature than what may have otherwise been the case, because a lot of the funding that ICE is currently utilizing comes from their one big ugly bill, and that's something that we'll collectively be working on as our discussions continue.
Any loss of life is a tragedy, and I think all of us can agree that in this situation it was preventable. I've spoken to the president today on the situation here on the ground. I also just got off the phone a little while ago with Governor Walz and spoke to him as well. I want to reiterate first with all of you the facts of what happened. At 10:25 a.m. Central Time, Immigration and Customs Enforcement were carrying out lawful operations here in Minneapolis. Because of the adverse weather that Minneapolis has seen in recent snow, one of the vehicles became stuck and ensnared in the snow. Law enforcement were attempting to push out this vehicle, and when a mob of agitators that were harassing them all day began blocking them in, shouting at them, and impeding law enforcement operations. ICE officers and agents approached the vehicle of the individual in question, who was blocking the officers in with her vehicle, and she had been stalking and impeding their work all throughout the day. ICE agents repeatedly ordered her to get out of the car and to stop obstructing law enforcement, but she refused to obey their commands. She then proceeded to weaponize her vehicle, and she attempted to run a law enforcement officer over. This appears as an attempt to kill or to cause bodily harm to agents, an act of domestic terrorism. The ICE officer, fearing for his life and the other officers around him and the safety of the public, fired defensive shots. He used his training to save his own life and that of his colleagues. He was treated at a local hospital, has been released, and is now with family. I encourage the American people at this point in time to pray for him, but also to pray for the deceased's family and her loved ones.
We've come together and we're here to announce a lawsuit we're filing against the United States Department of Homeland Security to end the unlawful, unprecedented surge of the federal law enforcement agents into Minnesota. Because this has to stop. It just has to stop. We allege that the obvious targeting of Minnesota for our diversity, for our democracy, and our differences of opinion with the federal government is a violation of the Constitution and of federal law. We allege that the surge's reckless impact on our schools, on our local law enforcement, is a violation of the 10th Amendment and the sovereign laws and powers of the Constitution grants to states. We allege that DHS's use of excessive and lethal force, their warrantless, racist arrests, their targeting of our courts, our churches, houses of worship, and schools are a violation of the Administrative Procedures Act on arbitrary and capricious federal actions. And we ask that the courts will end the surge of thousands of DHS agents into Minnesota. We ask the courts to end the DHS unlawful behavior in our state, the intimidation, the threats, the violence. We ask the courts to end the tactics on our places of worship, our schools, our courts, our marketplaces, our hospitals, and even funeral homes. The Constitution gives Minnesota the sovereign authority to protect health and well-being of every single person who lives on our borders. The Constitution gives us the right to vote for who we want, pray however we want, and be whoever we want without fear of being racially profiled, assaulted, or killed in our own communities. We're going to defend those rights because as much as they like to believe it, DHS is not above the law, and the people of Minnesota are certainly not beneath it.